thank you so much for coming on today, Spencer. I've been a big fan for a long time. I think when I was going through university, not too long ago actually, I always looked up to these big people in design, putting all this content out and trying to support the community. And I always thought, one day maybe I could do something like that. And that's kind of like your channel, but also other people around the world kind of inspired me to, do something in the community as well. And yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, well, thank you. I started it a long time ago and kind of similar idea. Just wanted to give back to the design community,
Mm,
especially having been a student and not really being able to connect with professionals. So I've just always loved that part of what I do.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I always find the most amazing thing about design is just how friendly people are. Like 99% of people you talk to are willing to come on and have a chat, or even just in general, like they're just friendly they just want to talk about design because they're passionate about it.
Yeah, I agree. Certainly there's exceptions to that.
Mm,
Be- because design is so small, I think your
yeah,
reputation precedes you
exactly.
and
Yeah,
sometimes outpaces you. So I think people are generally nice that way.
yeah, yeah. Well, maybe just to start off, what experiences in your life really shaped you and created the designer that you are today and really, made you want to start something in the community?
Wow, that's that's a big question. So I'm from Jamaica.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew that. Not everyone does because I speak with an American accent, but I think my upbringing, for
Mhm.
one, my parents and just where I was. I grew up in a time, born in 1982,
Mm,
didn't really have smartphones and all these like distractions. So creativity was just a part of our lives. Like that's
mm,
how we entertained ourselves, with very little. So my formative years I think were influential that way. Interestingly enough, there were times when my brother and I would get in trouble because he's of a similar mind. He actually went into civil engineering, but we were curious enough to take things apart,
mm.
put them back together. And I remember one time in particular where we got in so much trouble because we burned a hole in the carpet. We weren't supposed to be doing that, right? We had taken apart some radio and we're making some electrical contraption. Um, but I would say that was one time of my life that was certainly influential.
Mm,
And I think really that was probably the foundation of just this yearning for creativity or curiosity about it. My
mm,
father as well, he at the time he was in business, but his background was in chemistry and botany.
mm,
And in his spare time he would paint. And so I have memories when I was a child, when I was younger, he would sit on the veranda and do oil paintings. And I always found that fascinating. I wanted to be good at visual communication. I just didn't know what to do with it. So
mm,
those are two experiences that come to mind. Certainly, there's more along the way, but
mm.
those two in particular come to mind.
Yeah, I've read your book, the Exploring Perspective one.
Oh,
Yeah, I
oh,
have it
awesome!
on
Thank you.
Amazon. Yeah, really nice, really good book. I liked how authentic it was. Like it was just like a book saying, we start here, we're gonna get there. Like no one's a professional, in one day kind of thing. Because I feel like with sketching, like sketching is in my eyes the pinnacle of this, where most people believe that it's just this skill that everyone has that no one can really ever work towards getting. It's just this, like you have it or you don't kind of thing. But I like how your book kind of represented that, that necessarily isn't the case. And if you work hard at anything, you can get there.
Yeah, I mean, for some people, some things will be harder,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
of course.
But I'm a big believer, like if you just believe in yourself and
Mm,
work really hard, you can achieve at least some level of competency,
yep.
if not mastery, of any given skill
Mm,
or ability, if you're willing to put in the work, for sure.
mm. Yeah, and that's the ultimate thing, commitment. I suppose with design, it's such a competitive field, and that kind of bleeds into a lot of other areas of design that you have to be pretty determined to get somewhere.
It is. It is. I mean, design can be savage, but
Mm,
also, like you said, so kind and accommodating
mm.
and open at the same time. If anything, I think our biggest competition tends to be ourselves.
Yeah, definitely.
When we talk about design being a competitive field, really, I think certainly we compare
Mm,
ourselves and our achievements to others. I'm one of those people who believes that comparison, however, is a thief of joy, and the
mm,
joy we find in ourselves when we push ourselves to do more, be more, is supremely satisfying.
yeah, definitely. and that sometimes criticizing ourselves really limits our overall ability, and like kind of getting past that barrier is, I suppose, one of the lessons that you have to learn early on if you want to succeed. Because like
Yeah,
especially when you're at uni, I mean, it's the first lesson. You're self-critical of yourself compared to your peers, and then it just, if you don't kind of work past that, you just move that into industry practice.
yeah, as part of Offsite, I teach a class called Design Discourse. I
Mm.
believe you had Hector on before
Yeah,
from
Hector was great.
Advanced Design. And one of the lessons we talk about critique and criticism and the
Mm.
difference, right? And
Mm.
criticism really is just to tear down. And you don't want to tear down yourself, but
Mm.
rather look at opportunities for improvement,
Mm.
because all of us, because we're human, are gonna fail. You know,
Yeah.
I used to have a very pronounced fear of failure. I mean, I remember when I put my stuff out on the internet and I was just bracing myself. People are gonna hate this, you know. I didn't want to fail, but at the same time, I've learned over the years through various experiences that failure is a chance to learn.
Mm. Yeah.
And if you try to live a life where you're not willing to critique yourself or see
Mm.
yourself, and take that head on, you're just gonna kind of be you're not really gonna grow,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I do appreciate the thought there regarding critique, self-critique,
Mm.
but would caution, I
Yeah.
guess if any young designers are listening, don't be too hard on yourself.
Mm.
Um, but it's okay to examine yourself and where you're at for sure.
Mm. I suppose it's hard as well because we're in, as designers, we're inherently critical, not even of ourselves, but of everything. Like that
Hmm.
is kind of what we have to do. We have to be critical of the things around us so that we could see design improvement and design solutions. You know, my girlfriend always complains like that I'm too critical of like the environment around me, but it's not that I'm critical. I'm just, you know, I always see potential and improvement. You know what I mean?
Yes, potential improvements, opportunities, or as I call them, probopportunities, problems and opportunities.
Yeah.
At the same time, you know, when it comes to critique from me, one thing I try to hold myself to, a standard, if you will,
Mm.
is to not be lazy with it
Mm.
and just say I don't like it. Especially because to an outsider, you know, you've mentioned your girlfriend a few times.
Mm.
I have friends who see me do the things I do, and
Mm.
they don't really understand
Mm.
what we might be thinking as designers. So I try to qualify any critique I offer. Hey, this is a poor execution of whatever principle or
Mm.
symmetry or balance, whatever, and here's why, rather than just saying, I don't like it.
Yeah. You know, it's good to have a something to back up your criticism.
Yeah, I think so. I think
Yeah.
so. Definitely something that is a game changer as a designer. It's like we learn all these hard skills. By hard skills, I mean like sketching or
Mm.
CAD, or might be a certain piece of software. But there's the other side to it, which is how do you communicate? How do you
Mm.
interact with people? How do you market yourself,
Mm.
or push your idea in a way that allows other people to understand what you are trying to achieve and the
Mm.
value that you're offering?
Mm. That comes down to the value of storytelling as well and being a good storyteller.
You know, it's yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I feel as though I just turned 40 last year, and I've kind of been seeing the world with fresh eyes almost. I don't know if it's just part of the human experience, but one of the things I have been thinking a lot about is the currency of story,
Mm.
and how, I mean, even you go into an interview, you sit down, you're showing your portfolio,
Mm.
you're trying to get someone to buy into the story of you and what
Mm.
you have to offer, as much as they're listening to the story, and they're also trying to interpret what you're saying and creating their own story. There's so much of that
Mm.
in our own human experience. When you really think about it, so much of life really comes down to stories and storytelling,
Mm.
right?
Yeah. Being an effective storyteller. Yeah, we really have to perceive, kind of promote that narrative that we're wanting to put out. And I suppose what I found early on in my time out of uni is that like my portfolio wasn't necessarily presenting a narrative, which I think is something that you maybe develop over time, but something that I wasn't really aware of when I was in university. The need
Hmm.
to have a narrative in the projects that you convey, like what is the story that you're trying to tell by each project.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be you know, explicit or
Mm.
overt, the story you tell, but certainly the products you show, the skills you show,
Mm.
your explanation should at least form some cohesive narrative about
Mm.
yourself,
Yeah.
implicitly and inherently, with regards to how you present that.
Mm. Lemanouche. In case you haven't heard of them, they're a design organization that helps educate designers all around the world so they can stay up to date with the latest software needs so that they can be competitive in this overly competitive design landscape. Full disclosure, I was provided this software free of charge to give my honest, unbiased review of the product. Personally, I found this course very beneficial. Before the course started, I had absolutely no knowledge of Rhino. I'd never opened the software before. I went from that to having a good grasp of the fundamental skills of Rhino and moving on to the more complex skills towards the end of my experience with Lemanouche. Currently, I've just passed the first major portion of the course and I've already a solid grasp on the software. The course walks you through the basic tools, then slowly progresses you onto the more complex tool set of Rhino. My only critique would be that the tutorials are using macOS, and personally I use Windows, which initially was somewhat confusing as there are differences between the macOS version of Rhino versus the Windows version. But I contacted the Lemanouche support and they were very helpful and got me back on track, and I haven't had any issues since. In the Rhino course, you'll start modeling a basic mock-up pod, then moving on to fully modeling the Nintendo Switch. Next, modeling the Bang & Olufsen Bayo Play speaker, a Google concept, and finally, using the new sub-D tools to model a pair of sunglasses. This comprehensive course is a good step forward in your Rhino learning experience and has given me the tools to work on some key projects that I was looking to move on to once I learned Rhino. Lemanouche also offers a range of other courses for software such as Keyshot, Grasshopper, Photoshop for industrial designers, and much more. If you're interested, check out the affiliate link in the description, and a small portion will go back to me to help fund the podcast and bring it to the next level. Thank you. Now back to the podcast. Well, yeah, maybe to move on from that, what started Offsite? Oh, not Offsite. What started Sketch a Day? And
Oh man,
why did you decide on this crazy idea of creating a YouTube channel?
we're gonna go way back. So
Way
we got to
back.
go back to 2007, 2008, something like that. I was working at Astro Studios at the time in San Francisco. It was my first job out of college. I had interned there. And I also helped my best friend at the time get a job. And so he was sitting in front of me. And I remember one day we were taking like a lunch break or something. I don't know. Maybe I got distracted with the internet and I saw some sketch demonstration on YouTube. Someone had put together a video and it was just horrible. Just like probably one of the worst examples of how to draw a car I'd ever seen. Not that at the time, I mean, I was still learning. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to come across as totally condescending. I just saw an opportunity there because even less than a year out of college, I thought, wow, hey, his name was John. Hey, John, we can do better than this. We can certainly do better than this. And so we decided to give it a shot. But the conversation started with, hey, maybe we should just make some videos and put out there. And then we thought, well, let's get an actual YouTube channel or Vimeo channel. I think Vimeo is what we were using at the time. And then we thought, let's start a blog. And eventually it became, well, let's make a website. I did not even know WordPress existed at the time, but it did. So I embark on this journey to learn. And I'd done some HTML coding and PHP and a little bit of SQL stuff because I dabbled in computer science as well. So went ahead and built probably the least secure CMS anyone could ever build. And I put it up as Sketch a Day at the time, or no, ID Sketching. That was the first one at the time. Unfortunately, I lost that domain because it lapsed. But ID Sketching was the website. So started that, and the interest was so insane that we had to take the website down because it just kept crashing. Right. I just built my own content management system, so I wasn't prepared for any sort of load balancing or anything like that. Eventually discovered WordPress, rebuilt it as ID Sketching, and ran that blog for I think maybe about 2 years at the time, 2 or 3 years. When we launched that, we would do video demos and have guest artists as well, or designers. Michael DeTulo is one of them, and I had another friend of mine, Josh, at the time that I'd interned with at GM. He was contributing as well, and I think Jeff Smith. As a part of it, however, I wanted to, a curious thing happens when you leave school, and frankly, even as an independent designer, which I'm doing right now, it's easy to let your skills slip. And so you have to hold yourself to a standard of consistent practice. So that's where the idea of Sketch a Day came from. and it was a feature on the ID sketching website. So it was like a mini blog.
Mm.
And I would just post a drawing without context, concern, or any sort of, I guess, project brief. I just wanted to draw because
Mm.
I enjoyed it. And it's, for me, it's an important part of how I communicate as a designer. In fact, as we're waiting to begin, I was sketching on a project that I've been thinking of for a while. So I wanted to maintain that, start as a feature, and then eventually decided, you know what, let's spin this off into its own website.
Mm.
Partly because I wanted some IP separation from the main property and a space where I could just do what I wanted to do. And so Sketchaday was born as another website where I was just posting images. And then came Instagram.
Mm.
You know, man, I sound old. Then came Instagram. I was like, this is a lot easier than me posting to a website. So then I started Instagram and that blew up.
Mm.
And then, you know, kind of over the years dabbled, well, I'll say over the years, ID sketching kind of tapered off, and then Sketchaday was growing. And
Mm.
I also wanted to be able to do things that weren't necessarily specifically industrial design sketching,
Mm.
right?
Branch out a
So
bit.
that was, yeah, so that was part of the reason for Sketchaday. Let's see. Oh yeah. So then started the YouTube thing, and that's led to tons of opportunities. Met amazing people, travel the world, been able to kind of share that skill with everyone. But above all else, and all these details I told you, the main reason we did it, and I did it, frankly, was where I went to school. We were kind of isolated in the
Mm.
Intermountain West,
Yeah.
here in Utah, and so we didn't. Man, this is this is taking me back. The only like real resources we had were a website called Product Design Forums. You had Core 77 forums, and then there was the Gnomon workshop, and Scott Robertson also had his website drawthrough.com, which I think is still active. And there are a couple other people out there, Feng Zhu and so forth. So there wasn't like a steady flow stream of fresh content that we could consume as students and learn, because a lot of us were hungry. You talk about
Mm.
how competitive design is. Design education is even more competitive because
Mm.
you're jockeying for internships and opportunities, and you want to shine, right? So we didn't have that. And when I graduated and recognizing what I went through, just trying to work hard, right?
Mm.
I wanted to give back. So it's always been about giving back.
Mm.
I do make a living doing it now, but back then it was really just about heart and love, and it still is. You know, it still is.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's really nice to hear the story. Like obviously I'm very early on in my, content creation journey, but it's nice to hear
Yeah.
how like it always starts off at 100. I mean, I'm in the same boat, I suppose, as you were back then. Like I'm not doing it for money. I'm just doing it for, my own satisfaction and just meeting people around the world. And it's been great from that standpoint.
I will tell you a little secret though. I haven't told a lot of people this. When I did start ID sketching and Sketchaday, even though I wasn't, charging for content or access or anything like that, and I still don't. I mean, I do produce resources that people purchase, and I have a book now.
the book, yeah.
I remember thinking to myself, one day this will pay off and it won't be, but not in terms of money, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking I could reach and touch a lot of people, and maybe somehow things might come of that. And it's been like cool to see. Here we are, will that be 13 years now? Something like that. Yeah, 13 years or so later, it's happened. It's kind of a cool feeling. So to your point, doing it for the right reason, doing it for love or
Mm.
passion or whatever, I think that's going to take you, not that you asked, but it's going to pay off eventually,
Yeah.
right? As long as your heart's in the right place and people know you're being genuine. And
Mm.
I've learned a lot in the process,
Mm.
grown a lot as a person, had some low points and high points, but yeah, it's been cool to see, I guess, that thought that I had come to fruition.
Yeah, it's always very satisfying when something like that happens in your life, when you really commit yourself to something with no, foreseeable outcome, and then, the positive outcome does happen. I feel like that's when you find the most satisfaction in life. Mm.
It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier when you're younger. I mean, when you held up the book, right?
Mm.
I always wanted to write a book.
Mm.
Probably It's been at least 10 years. Probably when the blog started taking off and stuff, the
Mm.
website. And this is related to what we're talking about, where you never know what opportunities might come up, especially in your youth, as you're
Mm.
doing something you're passionate about. So I met someone, this is a very complicated story, but stick with me. So I
Yes.
met someone at Autodesk University forever ago. This would have been probably 2010, so
Mm.
maybe 13, let's say 10 to 13 years ago. Still a friend today. And met her and a couple other people. Met the people behind Sketchbook Pro, popular product, right? Met a few artists. Actually, at that conference, Daniel Simon was there, and Scott Robertson. Both talented people.
Mm.
Um, yeah, maybe I'll tell you a little side of this offline, maybe, but I digress. Okay, so back then, met this person and maintained friendship. She moves on to Adobe and reaches out to me one day and is like, "Hey, do you want to do some content for Adobe
Mm.
Stream?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'll do it, of course." And at this point, I just left my full-time job, and so it was nice to have some extra work to kind of keep things afloat, shall
Mm.
we say. So I took that and started doing content for Adobe on a regular basis. Eventually, they invited me to do Adobe Max. So I did that for 2 years. The second year I did that, my current publisher, Rocky Nook Books, decided or saw me presenting, and they reached out. I mean, they did some research on the back end, and then they reached out like, "Hey, have you ever thought about writing a book?" I'm like, "Yeah, I've been wanting to for this long." And so that's how I tell the story to hopefully share with the listeners that the small things we do, the opportunities we take, the good we put out into the world,
Mm.
it may not come back immediately, but had I not decided to share my passion, build a website, be consistent, and be kind, like we were
Mm.
talking about at the beginning, none of this would have happened. I wouldn't even
Mm.
be here doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So don't underestimate the small things you do now, because they can turn into big things later.
Mm. Yeah, that's really good advice. I think sometimes people can get lost in immediate satisfaction and, wanting that immediate, sometimes release of serotonin from getting some success. But sometimes, you're not going to get that and you have to really persist past that if you want to succeed.
I have so many stories. I want to tell another one
Go
because
for
you
it, mate.
bring up
That's
an
what
interesting
I
point. So, you talk about immediate satisfaction or gratification, right? So, I'm looking at a product right now in my studio here that I designed. So the person I started ID sketching with, and Sketch Today, we left Astro, started our own company, got a client. Client is like, "Hey, we have this idea for this product. It's going to change the world, and it's this distributed data storage product." Right. I don't know. I don't know if I'd say change the world. The founder was certainly one to put on a show and
Mm.
captivate people through his storytelling.
Good narrative, yeah.
So he was a good storyteller. So as a business owner at the time, you are faced with the decision, okay, how am I going to build this project?
Mm.
For us, we both started families at the time, young families. We were like, "Oh, we just need the money. We just need the
Mm.
money." I think the project was about, at the time, maybe 35 grand or something like that, maybe
Mm.
50.
Yeah.
And we're just starting out and
Mm.
fresh out of school, maybe 2-3 years. We're thinking, "Oh, this is good." Mind you, this is like 2009 money, so a project like this would be way different.
Yeah.
Um, but we saw dollar signs and we took that. Now, fast forward several years later, company gets acquired um, by another private company, and the regret sets in. I was too hungry in the moment for that thing, and I couldn't wait because the founder had offered us at the time, "Hey, we can do cash or we can do equity,"
Mm.
right? And I remember we both said, "No, let's just take the cash."
Mm.
Because, I mean, part of that's risky. You don't know if the company's going to succeed. You don't know if
Mm.
they're not. And then you do a bunch of
Gotta
free
be
work
pretty
and
passionate
whatnot.
about it.
But,
Yeah.
dude, if I had, I would have so much money right now. It's crazy. But I'm not mad or salty about it. It's just one of those stories in life that reminds me,
Mm.
like you said, um, it's not always about like getting that gratification in the moment, but
Mm,
sometimes you got to be a little strategic and have some foresight, uh,
mm.
and that'll pay off.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Um, you list yourself as a UX slash UI slash ID designer, multidisciplinary, these fancy terms these days. Um, do you practice regularly in different fields or do you focus more on ID? And would you recommend that people kind of follow that multidisciplinary path?
The last few years have been a journey for me. I'm not sure if I have UI there, but UX for
About
sure,
UI.
certainly. In
Yeah.
any case, the last few years have been a journey for me. Been on a bit of a personal note. I've always been this multi-direction, multi curiosity, interest person.
Mm,
Always like I I kind of settled on this idea that I just love to learn, and
mm,
then I don't know what it is about age 40, but your body changes, your mind changes, things change. And I, a few months ago, started feeling stuck.
mm,
And I was like, something is wrong with me. I don't know what's going on. I don't have the same drive. And this is an answer to your question, don't worry. But went in actually to my doctor and I was like, hey, I don't know what's going on. I think, and I'd done some reading, and my sister actually had mentioned this to me. She said, "You might have ADHD." I was like, I don't think so. I'm just thinking I have a terrible memory and I miss things. I know trying to schedule this show, like I missed a few things. Turns
that's it.
out, went ahead and got some psychological testing, and yeah, I do have ADHD. So I have always been multi-potentiate, multi-interested,
Mm,
multi-curious. It's hard for me to put myself into a box
mm,
because I love to play outside the box. That's who I am. So yeah, I dabble in UX. I would say most of my work is ID or illustration related.
mm,
Um, Education as I get older is a bigger and bigger part of what I do. And I've also played outside the box in that regard because I'm not a traditional educator.
mm,
I've had opportunities to do that, but decided to kind of again play outside the box. So um, I've just always been a bit all over the place. It's really hard for me to say I am this or I'm that. So lately, I've settled on creative troublemaker or just creative because I don't think I'm just an industrial designer. I don't think
mm,
I'm just concerned with UX. I don't think I'm just an illustrator or just an educator. I do a lot of things.
mm.
So I'm Spencer. I don't know where to put me, but I've just always loved doing a lot of things.
I think that's an easy path to go down as a designer as well. Like, because we're inherently, if we're interested in something that is as broad as industrial design, I feel like moving into other potential disciplines isn't much of a stretch. And I think a lot of people kind of find interest in that. Like even me personally, I mean, I do out of my current role, I do a bit of more graphic design as well as like industrial design, and like I'm looking to move into UX design as well because as I'm kind of like you, I suppose. Learning more is just more fun the way I see it. And like, why wouldn't I want to learn more?
I do think if you are the type of person who's going to dabble in a lot of things, I think self-awareness is
Yeah,
key because otherwise you might put yourself in a corner. You
yeah,
mentioned graphic design, right? You're doing that as
mm,
part of your work. I'm competent, but I'm not well, maybe capable or competent, whatever, but I'm not like I don't have the sharp skills in that
yeah.
field. So I
Which
know my
makes
own
yeah,
limitations is what I'm trying to say. You have to know
yeah,
your limitations and
yeah.
um
I think you
you
can
know,
kind of
it's
get stuck becoming a bit of like a jack of all trades, master of none as well, which I found like
mhm.
at uni, I was like, I want to learn new software packages every week so I can like have all these skills. But you can kind of get stuck in a trap like, of diversifying yourself too much, and then you become
Yes.
not particularly good at anything.
So I still have a to-do item, learn Blender. Still
Yeah, me too.
I still want to dabble. I'm like, one of these days I'll have time. I tend to describe my life as littered with artifacts of my best intentions. So whether it's a tool or an app or something, it's just like I'm gonna get the thing and I'm gonna work on it. I don't get to everything. And you make a good point that if you don't master something, if you're not competent in something, um, you may get known for nothing,
Mhm,
right? In my case, it's interesting because I and we kind of opened the conversation here about sketch-a-day and drawing and all that. That has been the vehicle for creating awareness and marketing for myself, my skills, my
mhm,
abilities. and it's been great. It's been great. And sometimes I do wish I showed other sides of myself, but again, it's a matter of being pragmatic and knowing my role or
Mm,
my lane, so to speak,
mm,
and kind of sticking there.
yeah, working hard at what you know you do well best, kind of thing. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's good. We spoke about offsite briefly. I'm
Hmm.
very interested by it. I think it's something very beneficial in the current world of industrial design. I think maybe it could, maybe it's a stretch, but I think maybe it could even revolutionize what we call education, that kind of style of education in the coming years, especially for industrial design, something that I don't think you really need a degree for. I think you could probably, if you have the skills, you could do the job, if you know what I mean. Um, so yeah, like what kind of what brought you down that path, and like are you passionate about that kind of future for education as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's another fantastic question. So this all kind of began before the pandemic. I don't know if Hector gave you his backstory or not, but
Yeah, you gave rough backstory, yeah.
we had been talking behind the scenes about maybe doing some sort of experimental camp or experience or intensive in a physical location
Mm,
with students who might be interested in working with professionals. And all of a sudden, the world caught fire with COVID. Everyone is stuck at home, and I got to give it to Hector. He had the foresight to say, "Let's just do it. Let's
mm,
launch." And I sometimes I tend to be cautious with these things, but I just ran with it. And so we decided to create this 12-week online experience and kind of created a patchwork of technologies and platforms that we would use to communicate, build community,
mm,
um, have opportunities for ideas and cross pollination of those ideas. And we built Offsite.
mm,
So there's, started with one cohort or one section rather. And pardon me, we'd have 6 instructors covering a range of topics, and I'm one of those instructors. And Hector asked me to teach design discourse, not sketching,
mm,
which is always fun when the students join and they're like, "What? You're not teaching drawing?" No. We're going to talk about life. We're going to talk about design and philosophy and communication and problem solving, but maybe I'll draw some stuff along the way. So it's been really fun.
mm,
And as far as revolutionizing education, I think one word that comes to mind for me with offsite is essentialism. And that is to say, we try not to teach things that won't get you there. I don't want to say things
mm,
that are useless, but you know, you've been through uni,
mm,
not everything matters as much as other things. And
mm,
so we try to just get to the meat of what it means to be a good designer. What are the
mm,
skills, the things you need to know? Um, and particularly, how how can or how can we help you find an edge that helps make you distinct as
mm,
a designer? Again, going back to this idea of telling a story about yourself, and that's a part of the course as well through a class called Professional Self Presentation. It's a weird name, but it's about portfolio building and
mm,
narrative storytelling and marketing yourself. Those are things that you may not be necessarily taught in school,
mm,
but they are things that we have learned as instructors over the combined decades of experience that we've have.
mm. Yeah, no, I think the concept of offsite is just great. Like, it's when you think about it, what student wouldn't want to be taught by like very key prominent designers in the world? Like sometimes I suppose a criticism of current education is that, maybe some of the teachers don't even pursue the career anymore and they kind of just go down an academic field, which has its own benefits. You learn a lot of theoretical knowledge that maybe even practicing designers might not have, and sometimes that
Mm-hmm.
can be beneficial. But at the same time, having those people that they've actually got the job and they've worked hard in that industry, I think that can be really beneficial to learn from these people as a mentor.
Yeah, one thing you do learn, or I'd learned, I should say, as a professional, is it's nice to fly in the clouds as far as
Mm,
ideas go and kind of mess around with the design or
mm,
explore solutions. But at some point, you have to land that plane,
mm,
right? You have to build a runway and make sure air traffic controls there and check all your systems and land that plane safely,
mm,
right? And it may feel like even building the airport as you're trying to land
mm,
that plane, but those are skills you learn in the real world and skills that I think matter. So when it comes to education, yeah, we try to bring that into the course or courses.
Mm,
And one thing I do appreciate and love about the class is it's as much of an educational experience for the participants as it is for us as
mm,
instructors.
yeah.
We get to, as professional designers, stay even sharper because we're dealing with the up and coming new energy perspective,
Mm,
and it's fun to have myself be challenged and
mm,
not get stuck in my old ways, right?
mm,
There are times where I kind of have to hand back and be like, okay, what do I really think about this? You know, especially when it comes to like some unique aesthetic or just a different take or angle. So
mm,
there's that aspect, but one last thing here is that the offsite group tends to be made up of an international cohort of
mm,
students. So we have quite a few students right now from India, the African continent, South America, the United States, Europe, countries all over. And so you get this diversity of opinion, or not opinion, perspective and experience being brought into the classes, and particularly mine, where I'm taught. We start off examining reality and truth, and it sounds weird, but it's really about critical thinking
mm,
and applying that to your own design philosophy, for example, or your own design practice, considering your impact as a designer in a
mm,
very real and tangible way. One of the fun assignments I give the students is to either document every piece of trash that they take out for a
mm,
week or go visit a landfill, because our proximity to problems and
mm,
situations oftentimes impact how we feel. And so if we can help prepare designers to be more mindful, more empathetic, or more skilled in particular areas, we
mm,
do believe at Offsite that we are changing the game, so to speak, as opposed to kind of templatizing the educational experience and offering that to everyone. The
mm,
courses are dynamic. Sometimes we change week to week. We try to have the courses overlap, where assignments might have overlap with others, so that we're not overloading the students, but also so that they can apply the varied skills that they learn in 12 weeks
mm,
in a very strong way, to help boost their portfolio. And so far, it's been successful. We've had some good placements with students at a variety of companies, so it's been
mm.
good.
And that's, I mean, that's the ultimate thing, I suppose. I think sometimes with universities maybe gets lost. But the end goal is getting the job, right? And like they're the skills you need to learn. Like what skills are actually going to help you get a job,
Yeah,
in the classic sense.
you mentioned anyone can do industrial design if you have the skills. We've had a couple experiences with students who have switched career paths.
Mm,
Some a bit more adjacent to industrial design, but
yeah,
others that are just completely orthogonal, and they've gotten jobs
mm,
after doing
yeah,
offsite. You know, not because the 12-week experience was magical, so much as they became a part of our family and community.
mm,
A big part of the program, it sounds like I'm pitching it now, but a big part of the program that I love is the mentorship
mm,
aspect. And so right now we have two cohorts. So there's one called Breaking into Design, and then the other one's Leveling Up.
yeah,
So the second cohort, Leveling Up, they have access to professionals who have graciously offered their time and uh, skills,
mm,
right, in the form of mentorship to these students. And that's huge
mm,
because, again, like myself, when I started Sketch-A-Day and ID sketching, thinking, I wish I had this when I was a student.
mm,
Offsite's kind of like that,
yeah,
where I mean, you don't get that in college where you
mm,
have 60 professionals working with students to help them sharpen their portfolios
mm,
or talk through problems or issues that they may be having. Like it's really cool not only to see us as a team working to educate these students, but the community. You talk about kindness
yeah,
and how willing the design community is to help younger designers. And this is just one, I think, stellar example of how they've really come through and helped.
mm,
And then in terms of paying it forward, we have the students who went through, and typically they're a little bit more experienced. The students that go through the second section of our course offering, they have the opportunity to mentor those who are trying to break into industrial design.
mm,
So it's kind of this virtuous system, if you will, that
mm,
we've kind of put together. And I think in doing good and approaching things with heart, that really does make a difference. And because we are small and not beholden by certain what should we say, requirements, we can
Mhm.
be flexible.
Yeah.
You talk about disrupting education. Part of that is being nimble, being able
Mm.
to adapt, and certainly cost wise being much more
Mm.
affordable than some traditional avenues.
Yeah. Yeah, I think university in some ways is really limited. Like it's not even necessarily that they're not doing a good job of what they're doing. Like I think university can be really beneficial, and I really enjoyed my time at university, and I think that I got a lot out of it. But I think, as you're saying, it's not as flexible. Like they get limited by the needs of the government to kind of dictate what is taught at university. High overheads of the land and the teachers, because it's in person. There's just so many overheads that kind of limit the capabilities of the university in the end. And then they like rely on international students, which means they have to market it towards that. And you know, yeah, I think having a modern course like Offsite, I suppose you kind of lose a lot of those limitations, and you can really push just a good quality education out.
The other thing I should point out here that I think we decided to do differently
Mm,
at the beginning of all this was to have live classes. So I forgot to mention that, but every class we have is live,
mm,
meaning these students from all over the world, we're all meeting at the same time
yep,
and having discussions or learning content. I also teach a class on Autodesk Fusion 360 as well. Well, not specifically Fusion, but it's called Digital Tools, and it's
mm,
it's just about the digital tools we use as industrial designers. But the two we focus on are just Adobe Creative Suite and then or Creative Cloud and Fusion, so that the students have an opportunity to present their concepts in a somewhat compelling way, but
yep,
also bring those concepts to life in
mm,
some tangible ways as well.
yep, yeah. Who would you recommend Offsite to? You kind of mentioned that you've got your two courses. You got the starting out for people not
Mhm.
in design and then leveling
Yeah,
up.
breaking into design. Yep,
Working
and
design.
then leveling up.
Um, but like, what kind of specific person would you recommend it to that you think gets the most out of that kind of course?
So I would say for the breaking into design, someone who is even just curious about design, I wouldn't recommend it to students who have a lot of experience, say in college. Like, so let's say you're a third year student in
Mm,
university. I don't think the first course offering we have is really for you. That's where we're focusing on basic sketching. We have the digital tools course. I think it's see, I'm forgetting the name of this one, but there's one called believe it is design workflow or something like that, where
yeah,
we're just basically talking about the design process. How do you
yeah,
design something? And then there's another course that lightly touches on some CMF, right?
mm,
Materiality, I believe. And then the second cohort that we offer, we have design discourse. That's the one I teach. And I'll tell you who those are all for. Design discourse, design for manufacturing, the business of design, professional self presentation, studio workflow, which is more or less advanced CAD and advanced visualization using Keyshot and other
mm,
tools. And then real world sketching. So it's not so much sketching to sketch as it is sketching to communicate,
mm,
right? At a high fidelity, what you might expect in a real work situation. So the difference being the expectation for cohort two, the leveling up cohort, is for those who have at least some basic competency or familiarity with the tools and processes that we use in design. We're just
mm,
adding to that and adding perspective and our experience to those things. Breaking into design is more about what industrial design is and
mm,
why we do the things we do, or why is it important to sketch a certain way, and how do you go from a sketch to a concept to potentially prototyping that
mm,
product as well. And that cohort is one we're constantly working with. We're trying to find the sweet spot there.
mm.
We've had high school students take the course. We've
Okay.
had people who work at venture capital firms who are familiar with industrial design, but they want to learn more about what we do.
Mm,
We've had some students in university who just want to sharpen up those fundamental skills as well. But as I mentioned, we started this in the pandemic, And we even experimented once teaching a prototyping course, like
I heard about
hands-on prototyping
that.
with foam and foam core. I taught that one as well.
Yeah.
Talk about challenging teaching prototyping at a distance, right? But
Yeah.
one of the students who recently placed at a job, she's working at Target, corporate now as an industrial designer. She went through that course and it was rough. I won't say her name here. Hi, Amelia. Just kidding. But she worked so hard. Like she was one of those students that was memorable just for how dedicated she was at like sharpening her skills.
Mm.
So there's my long answer to your question.
Yeah, that's
But
great.
yeah, the second is just more about being an even better designer, and the first is how to be a designer.
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking last time I spoke to Hector, he inspired me and I was like, oh, maybe I should do offsite. And then like life got in the way. But who
Yeah,
knows? Maybe one day if I feel like with full-time work, it is hard to balance it, especially in Australia with the
it
time
is.
zones. Yeah.
We have students who, they're up at 3 in the morning
Yeah.
when I'm teaching. I'm like, what are you doing? But they love it that much, right?
Yeah.
And it's made a difference for them.
Mm.
We did have a student from Australia.
Mm.
Come to think of it, Foster, I think was his name.
Yeah, I think I spoke
Um,
to Hector
oh,
told me to reach out to, I think it was Foster, yeah. And I spoke to
yeah,
him.
yeah, Foster. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, for someone like you with experience, I think it still helps.
Mm.
Some of it may apply, some of it may not apply.
Yeah.
We're still trying to figure out ways to perhaps even go a little bit more a la carte. So if you want to, let's say the type of design you do, you haven't had as much manufacturing experience on the ground in another country, working with suppliers and
Mm.
doing quality checks or whatever, there's a class for that.
Okay.
Or maybe you want to sharpen up your business sketching skills,
Mm.
right? Your storytelling sketches or sketches that explain a product. You might take real world sketching, that kind of thing. But
Mm.
right now as it is, we do offer all 6 together.
Yeah, cool. Um, what to talk about next? We've covered so many topics already. As we move into challenging, economic times post-pandemic, what do you think designers should do to diversify themselves and stay competitive in this landscape?
Oh, that's a good one. I think especially maybe it's not even so much post pandemic as it is the technological revolution we're living
Mm.
through right now. I remember when NFTs came out and everyone was like, this is going to be the future. That died out. But this AI thing, this LLM, large language models, that have been developed, things like Chat GPT,
Mm.
you've got Midjourney, Dolly, that kind of thing,
Mm.
particularly as it relates to design. None of these tools are really purpose built for design.
Mm.
We have designers trying to use them. There is one interesting tool called viscom.ai. I don't know if you've heard of it or
Mm.
seen it, but that one is, man, as someone who's been like honing my sketching skills and working hard, I see that and I'm like, oh, really? Really? That was my edge. So to answer your question, I don't think it's so much about the challenging economics. I mean, that's certainly a factor, but I think the advice that I've always given, I think still stands, and that is
Mm.
to find that unique thing about yourself
Mm.
and like really work on that.
Mm.
You got to figure out a way to differentiate yourself from the pack, the field. Um, I don't think these are tools, by the way, the AI tools. I don't think they're tools that we should avoid
Mm.
or talk down about or anything like that, because they can be useful, right,
Mm.
if used in the right way. And there are companies that are working on ways to put designers in the driver's seat, so to speak. And that's where I think it's interesting. Companies like Viscom and what they're doing. Um, but as far as the economics go, yes, I don't want to gloss over that and say that it's not rough. I've been through one recession.
Mm.
That was 2008, 2009.
Mm.
Lost my job at Astro, right? And that was rough. I just got my dream job and you lose it. And one thing we learned in that experience, me and my business partner John, was just hard work. And I suppose many of you have heard that advice before: work hard, but really, truly,
Mm.
keep moving, do something, even
Mm.
if it means doing your own projects, your own products, your own explorations, your own research, whatever you got to do. Keep doing it. And also, because things are more challenging, it's even more imperative that, as I mentioned, you find that thing about you that makes you. I I often say this and people don't believe me. I'm not a great marketer, but I do put my work out there.
Mm.
And, I'm not always the most consistent with it, but it does pay off. So
Mm.
I would say put your stuff out there. Don't be shy. Don't be afraid to do that. And be consistent, work hard, and it'll work out.
Great advice. Thank you. What excites you the most about the future of industrial design? You've already mentioned AI, which is obviously a big hot topic at the moment. And I'm kind of in the same belief as you. I think that it could be kind of that we control it, we channel it into the right processes. Doesn't necessarily take our jobs, but you know what I mean. We can kind of use it to our advantage. But yeah, what else are you really excited about for the coming years of industrial design?
I I am deeply aware of and cognizant of how harmful what we do can be. And it's something that haunts me, man.
Mm.
Um Consumerism, like we make stuff better so more people want it. And there's always this tension between business and design because yeah, I want to do less harm. At the same time, business wants to sell more or do more, right?
Mm.
And finding that balance. So, to answer your question, what excites me is I think this next generation of designers who are so passionate and so vocal
Mm.
that they will affect change. I think they'll put on the right amount of pressure collectively that we'll start to see changes with the way, I mean, I say consumerism, there's always going to be needs for products that provide solutions to problems
Mm.
or close the gaps and opportunities that may be there. Granted, but I think we can always do it better, do it gentler, do it more consciously, in a way that's more caring. Like I said, something magical happens at 40. I think where you just start thinking about these things in a very kind of meta, high level way. And
Mm.
looking back on my career, I've had hits and I've had misses and I've had small things and big things. And I like to think that right now my focus, anyways, is design for mass appreciation.
Mm.
But going back to your question again, 'cause my mind is wandering, I'm excited for technologies that do allow us to produce products in a more conscientious and efficient way. Things
Mm.
like mass market or mass produced 3D printing,
Mm.
where the waste of that process is more minimal than say something like Apple is known for their CNC processes
Mm.
and glass and all that. There's potentially a lot of waste there. It's beautiful, but there's a lot of waste. So I'm
Mm.
excited for an opportunity to strike a good balance between beauty and functionality while
Mm.
minimizing waste. I hope that as a people, I guess generally, that we can become more conscious about these things, and so that we're not. I mean, I don't know how the weather was in Australia this year, but it was very strange where I live,
Really? Okay.
and it's almost like the climate's changing. I don't know. It's weird, but I'm starting to think. I'm not starting to think. I've always thought so, but we have a part to play in all this, especially as designers.
Mm.
So I'm optimistic and hopeful that the young
Mm.
people will change things. Technology enabling them to do so as well.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who maybe look down on industrial design in a way for just creating products that go to landfill or like creating another water bottle, you know what I mean? But the thing is, like, the industrial design can be really amazing. Like, we can really change the world. Like, we can have such a positive impact on the world around us if done right. And I suppose that's where it comes down to, educating the young designers to have that kind of mindset and to take that passion and that longing for a better world into their practice. Mm.
Yeah, I'm so inspired by younger designers. I really am. I'm not just saying that. It's like y'all are gonna do some amazing things. I just think change is on the horizon, and that to me
Mm.
that's really exciting.
Mm. Yeah. Um, there's always the oldest question, how does art and design, interrelate? I mean, in a lot of ways, people could say that your work is art. You definitely take a more visual approach to design with sketching and visualization. How do you see that interrelation between art and design, and how can we kind of strengthen the artistic element of design?
I think design, good design captures the imagination of people who experience it,
Mm,
and a good way to also capture the imagination of people and express yourself is through sketching, the visuals, the aesthetics, and that's my, I guess, go-to chosen means of communicating ideas. Um, I think bridging that gap, though, or the gap I'm thinking of in my head as far as good design and all that is, it's just striking the right balance, finding that right balance. But it does necessitate a bit of capturing the imagination of your audience. I've
mm,
just found that sketching has been, for me, just a very effective tool.
mm,
Even as I mentioned, you have these tools that make it easy now to visualize a concept. There's still something just so captivating and alluring about something that's hand done, that's real,
mm,
that effectively contains a part of the creator in that
mm,
piece. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I
mm,
did want to mention one more thing though with younger designers, and that is the democratization of design. Maybe that's the wrong word. Perhaps it's the tearing down of the gates, the gatekeeping. I feel like younger designers just don't play into all that, and there's going to be change where there's there's almost sometimes an elitism
mm,
with certain designers or design organizations that really could be done away with.
mm,
Particularly, you asked a question about the future of industrial design. As technology becomes easier to use, because industrial designers or designers aren't the only one with good ideas,
mm,
as these technologies are developed that allow people to participate in the process in a more meaningful way,
mm,
I think we're going to see more democratization. I think we're going to see challenges to the old guard, so to speak,
mm,
and any sort of gatekeeping effort to uh, preserve whatever integrity they want industrial design to have as a practice.
mm,
I think it's going to become more open. And to your point earlier, education wise, like, do you need to go through all that?
mm.
Really, truly? Can we deliver on those essentials and equip people with those tools to actually make the world a better place? Because that really should be the goal, and make
Mm.
people's lives better. The answer should be yes. It shouldn't be no, you have to go through this process, or no,
Yeah,
you have to do what I did, or you're not a real designer.
yeah,
To me, that's exciting and interesting as well.
mm. Yeah, it is really exciting. Yeah, I think what you're saying, like when you even think about tuition fees, like the concept of especially in America, like tuition fees in America are insane. Like here,
I
not
know.
too bad, but still,
It's a separate conversation, I'm sure.
yeah.
But yeah,
But when you think about that, like I don't know how much, like $100,000 to go to university in America, right? Roughly.
depends on where you go. I
Yeah.
know art center is expensive. CCS in Detroit,
Mm.
CCA,
Yep.
some of the bigger schools, yeah, they're more expensive. I was fortunate, and I'm one of those contrarians who doesn't believe that it's about the school you go to.
Mm.
Granted, had I gone to, and I actually had thought about going to art center at one point, and I looked at the tuition. I think at the time it was 80,000, and I said no way. I sure it would be a good experience,
Yeah.
and I would meet a lot of good people and probably have leveled up in my skills tremendously. But I thought to myself, well, if I apply myself and just grind,
Mm.
I can be good at this, is what I told
Mm.
myself. And you can be. So you don't have to pay, this is where I was going, you don't have to pay the 100,000. You
Right.
can go to a smaller school like I did and
Yep.
end up graduating without any student debt.
Yep.
So,
That's good. But like my whole
or
point
you
is like,
could go to school in Australia and not have any student debt, right?
well, we have Hex debt here, which is like where the government pays for it and we pay it back slowly.
Oh, okay.
But there's no interest, but then it indexes, which is basically just interested with a fancy word for interest, which is stupid.
Oh,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Because I didn't know that until the end. I was like, what is this indexing? That's
Yeah.
scam. Anyway. But yeah, my whole point is like, so that $100,000, let's say you did offsite instead, you paid like what is it, $4,000? Um,
I think right now it's like three, yeah.
yeah. you pay that money, you've got like what, like $95,000 that you could be using on, starting a company, starting a product design. Like,
Well, I mean, it is a crash course.
yeah,
When I say crash course, I mean it's 12 weeks.
yeah,
It's not equivalent to the 4 years you might
yeah.
spend or 3 years in university, but we have had students take it multiple times. And even then, if you were to take it 5 times, that's still only $15,000 compared to your point, 100,000.
Yeah, exactly. Um, what impact have you observed Sketch a Day has had on the wider community?
This is an awkward question. I don't like to talk about myself that much. At least this particular accomplishment. Because again, I went into it not really like I don't keep track of lives changed or touched or whatever. I do get messages from time to time from people.
Mm,
And this will be an amalgamation of feel goods,
mm,
if you will, that I've gotten over the years. But it's everything from thanks for helping me get into my program. I wouldn't have gotten in if I hadn't found your channel in high school and
mm,
worked my ass off. Or hey, thanks for helping me keep my job. I've been working really hard at this particular skill. Or it might even just be, hey, you're inspiring me to work harder or to focus on this or that. And I've gotten those messages, and that feels good. As far as the broader community goes, um, I don't know. It's hard for me to say. I mean, I do on a personal level, I do have some degree of notoriety, at least in this field. And that's not to say like that's the only impact, but it does feel good. I'll put it this way. It feels good to, at the end of the day, have created something that I can leave behind after I die or go that will have a lasting impact or has had a lasting impact on people in terms of helping them pursue their passions more effectively.
mm,
Um, I, I I rest easy thinking about that.
mm. And I mean, it feels in anything in life, like legacy is all you really have. Like when you're, in the
At the end of
ground,
the day,
what
yep,
else have you got left apart from legacy? And like you have a legacy. You can say that you've, contributed to the future generations of designers that come along. That your effect is going to continue on to have an effect, and they can go back to
it's
these
weird.
archives.
It is weird to think. I do feel a little older now. I feel like probably Scott Robertson felt like when I was going through college. I'm sure. He's
Yeah.
a friend of mine though, but um, yeah, it's a strange feeling. It's a
Mm,
strange feeling, but it's always, like I said, always been about passion and just doing what I love.
mm. Yeah, that's great. Well, on that note, I think that's a good way to leave it. It was really nice to have you on to discuss. Thanks so much for coming on, for taking your time to come on this small up and coming podcast in Australia, across the world, and bring something back. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. I've never been to Australia. I've always wanted to go.
Yeah,
If I
come
ever
along.
do, I will let you know.
Yeah,
Yes.
come meet up. I have starting to build a bit of a network in Australia, so I'm sure I could set you up with some contacts to come visit, and I'm sure
Okay.
everyone would be willing to meet up and yeah, talk about design.
All right. That'll be fun.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Have a good day.
Okay. Thank you.